Welcome back. I am Monica Crowely. Thank you so much for rolling with me this weekend. Let's get straight to it, because joining me now is one of the most brilliant conservative intellectuals out there. Thomas Sowell is a syndicated columnist who has taught economics at Cornell and UCLA, among other universities. He is currently a scholar in residence at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. His website is tsowell.com, and his new book, which is an extraordinarily important book, is called Dismantling America. Professor Sowell, welcome.
Good being with you.
Well, congratulations on the new book. I'm about a quarter of the way through it, and there's so much rich and, frankly, very disturbing material in here. But what struck me is that the overarching theme of this book is that we are seeing a precipitous decline of the values and institutions that have propelled the United States as an exceptional power for over 200 years. Tell us what you mean.
Well, for one thing, the fundamental structure of the country, the governing of the country, has been changed considerably just within the past year or so. And that is, we have an increased amount of major sweeping legislation passed without any opportunity for the public to know in advance what it is, to see the issues debated, to hear opposing sides of it, either in congressional hearings or elsewhere. And we've seen it done not simply as a happenstance, but as a matter of principle. I think Nancy Pelosi said it all when she says you'll find out what's in the bill after it's been passed. There are many other things of the same sort. People appointed as czars, wielding unprecedented powers beyond those of ordinary cabinet members, without having to be vetted before the public in congressional confirmation hearings. So all of this pattern of doing things, as it were, in the dark of night, is a fundamental departure.
You know, the other day, Professor, I was at an event and Dick Armey spoke. Dick Armey, of course, the former House Majority Leader Republican, who now leads Freedom Works and is working with a lot of the Tea Party movement. And one of the things he said really struck me. He said, you know, the other day it occurred to me that the only force that can destroy America is our own government. And it really hit me because I said, that's it. That's it. We are focused on external enemies, as we should be, but it really seems that the only thing that can really destroy us is our own government, and that's happening.
Absolutely. Even our worst enemies, if we were to confront them militarily, they really couldn't stand up, and yet we're not going to do that. But more importantly, you have people actively working within the country to undermine the people's faith in the country, to polarize the people one against one another. And this didn't begin with this administration, although it really has reached sort of a crescendo since Obama took office. The notion that America is not an exceptional country, that it's like it's incredible. I think if you look back through history, the United States really is rarer than four-leaf clover among the nations of the world. And yet we're not allowed to believe that. Instead, we're supposed to apologize. I think the current controversy over the mosque tells us something about the attitude of many people, namely that we are to bend over backwards in being sensitive to other people's feelings, but other people have no reciprocal obligation to consider our feelings. It's an extraordinary time.
We're talking to Thomas Sowell. His new book is called Dismantling America. In this book, Professor, you write a lot about a lot of different examples of what you're talking about here, this crisis of dismantling America, the bailouts, the federal lawsuit against Arizona over illegal immigration, gay marriage, which has just picked up steam again in California thanks to a single judge, national security, or lack thereof. When you look at this whole list, what are sort of the one or two biggest things that jump out at you as emblematic of the crisis you're describing?
I guess the loss of faith in the country and the deliberate undermining of the faith in the country. One of the small things that I think has great implications is the fact that Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States, has sold millions of copies. I've seen it in college bookstores across the country. It's used as a text from the high schools to the colleges, and it is a total denigration of virtually everything that's ever been done in American history. At one time, I used to read English translations of Pravda and Izvestia during the Cold War. These communist organs never denigrated the United States to the extent as Howard Zinn's book that is used as a textbook across this country today. Why people feel the need to do that, I have no idea.
I was going to ask you, what is the motivation of these people, essentially the progressives, the far left, starting from the late 1920s, 1930s through today, through the Obama administration? What is their motivation for deliberately wanting to do this kind of dismantling? Is it a fundamental hatred of America, a resentment of it, guilt, liberal guilt, white guilt, wealthy guilt? What is it?
Those things play a role, but I think fundamentally the people who have spoken out to undermine the Constitution and to undermine the nation have typically been people who have been very much caught up in a sense of their own superior wisdom and virtue, which they need to impose upon the rest of us. And all the institutions of this country and the traditions and values of this country are opposed to that. And so they must, therefore, undermine those values, those traditions, and the Constitution. Not because they set out to do specifically that, but because they think that they have these wonderful plans, which obviously cannot be put into place until they first learn how to circumvent the institutions that provide freedom for the great mass of people.
We're talking to Thomas Sowell. His new book is called Dismantling America. What you're just describing there, Professor, is so true. And I think of two immediate examples that jump to my mind, both involving the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Last year, when the Tea Party movement really gained strength, and we're talking about a majority of Americans, this is not some fringe movement, a majority of Americans who believe in limited government, she dismissed them as AstroTurf. She said it's a small fringe group, it's AstroTurf. And then this week, talking about opponents of the Ground Zero Mosque, putting this mosque in this particular location, 70% of the American people, according to the most recent polls, she says, we ought to be investigated. So it seems to me that the elites in this country, whether it's in politics or the media or in the academic world where you are, they fundamentally cannot understand where middle America, where the majority of Americans are coming from.
Well, there is that, but more fundamentally, they don't think that the majority of Americans, that their beliefs really are entitled to much respect. That the elites already have it all figured out, and it's just a matter of putting it through, despite what the rest of us may think.
How have they been able to gain the reins of such power in all of these institutions, whether it's the academy or politics or the media?
Well, that's a huge question. I know in the case of educational institutions, this started 100 years ago with John Dewey, who thought that schools should not be simply a place pass on the knowledge and traditions of the older generation to the young. They should be places where teachers are, quote, agents of change, unquote, who prepare the young for living in a very different kind of world, the kind of world that the elites would like to see, as distinguished from the kind of world that's been traditional in this country.
Can the crisis trend that you describe in this book, Dismantling America, can that crisis trend be reversed?
Yes, I mean, nothing is inevitable until it happens. And I think the election coming up in November will be absolutely a crucial point in the history of this country. Because unless the people in Washington are defanged, that is, the administration loses at least one house of Congress, I don't see how they can be stopped thereafter. Many people are taking too much solace from the fact that Obama is down into the 40s in the approval rating. But what that means is that if he has the same majority going forward that he has right now, it's only a matter of legalizing some of the millions of illegal immigrants and getting them to the polls in 2010 for him to get another term and continue on the same course.
Right. Final question for you. Are you optimistic about America's future? And I ask you that because I know that we've come out of some really bad spots before, and we've always been a self-correcting republic. But this particular recession is sort of unlike anything we've ever seen before. This administration is sort of unlike anything we've ever seen before. So are you confident that we will self-correct here?
I cannot say that I am confident. I think it can be turned around. But what I truly fear is what will happen if it is not turned around beginning in November.
Yes, and I agree with you on that. Thomas Sowell, the book is extraordinary, a very important book to read. It's called Dismantling America. His website is tsowell.com. He is one of the most brilliant leading conservative intellectuals out there, so please go get his book. It's critically important that you do. Professor Sowell, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Monica Crowley, back right after this.